They say history is written by the victor. But what about those who lost? What about those who fought just as bravely but on the other side? Duryodhana's name has been etched in the Mahabharata as the antagonist, but was he really just a villain? Or was he a man trying to protect his family's legacy against impossible odds? Today we are going to uncover the real story of Duryodhana, not as a villain, but as a complex human being. In our last video, we explored Shakuni's role as a master strategist, driven by revenge against the Kuru dynasty. But perhaps Shakuni's most significant influence was on Duryodhana. He wasn't just Duryodhana's uncle, he was his guide, his motivator, and sometimes his greatest downfall. Together, they shaped the events that led to one of history's greatest wars. Duryodhana enters the Mahabharata as the eldest son of Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, the prince who was supposed to lead the Kuru dynasty to greater heights. From the beginning, Duryodhana was larger than life, strong, ambitious, and fiercely loyal to his family. But he was also deeply flawed. His envy toward the Pandavas wasn't just a passing emotion. For Duryodhana, it was deeply personal. He couldn't accept the Pandavas' growing favor in Hastinapur, their popularity, their virtues, and their success. To him, every step the Pandavas took forward was a step away from his rightful claim to the throne. But here is where things get interesting. Duryodhana wasn't entirely wrong in his feelings. Imagine being the eldest Kaurava prince, groomed to rule Hastinapur, only to see the elders and the people favor your cousins instead. His envy wasn't born out of pure malice, it was born out of a fear of losing everything he believed was his. And that's what makes Duryodhana such a fascinating character. He wasn't just driven by greed, he was also driven by loyalty. Loyalty to his brothers, loyalty to his friend Karna, and loyalty to his vision of what the Kuru dynasty should be. His flaws and virtues coexisted, making him as a human as any of us. Of course, no discussion about Duryodhana is complete without mentioning Shakuni. Shakuni fueled Duryodhana's ambition and envy, whispering strategies and ideas that often pushed him toward darkness. But here is the thing, Duryodhana wasn't a puppet. He made his own choices, and those choices were often rooted in his desire to protect what he believed was his legacy. For instance, the game of dice wasn't just about humiliating the Pandavas. It was about securing his position as the undisputed leader of Hastinapur. The same goes for his actions in the Kurukshetra war. Every decision he made, right or wrong, stemmed from his belief that he was fighting for justice, for his family, for his kingdom. So, how should we look at Duryodhana? Was he the villain of the Mahabharata, as history has painted him? Or was he a man shaped by circumstances, fighting a battle he thought was righteous? The truth lies somewhere in between. In the chapters ahead, we will explore Duryodhana's life in detail, his strengths, his flaws, and the events that defined him. From his unmatched skills in mess fighting to his unwavering loyalty to Karna, from the controversial game of dice to his final duel with Bhima, Duryodhana's story is as tragic as it is powerful. Duryodhana wasn't just a character in the Mahabharata. He was a mirror to the complexities of human ambition and loyalty. In the next chapter, we will dive into his early life, his birth, and his influences that shaped him into the man he became. Stay tuned as we unravel the story of one of the Mahabharata's most misunderstood figures. What happens when your birth is surrounded by omens and prophecies? When the very first cry you make fills an entire kingdom with dread. Duryodhana's journey begins long before he takes the throne, with a birth as mysterious as it is symbolic. Let's explore how his early life shaped the man who would become a central figure in the Mahabharata. Duryodhana's story starts with a 2-year-long wait. Yes, you heard that right, 2 years. Gandhari, Dhritarashtra's wife, was pregnant for an unusually long time. This wasn't just frustrating, it became a cause for concern. While she waited, Kunti, her sister-in-law, gave birth to her first son Yudhishthira. This only added to Gandhari's anxiety. In her frustration, Gandhari struck her womb. What happened next was both miraculous and unsettling. Instead of a child, a hard lump of flesh emerged from her womb. Imagine the fear and confusion of seeing something so unnatural. But this is where the story takes a turn. Says Vyasa, the wise and mystical seer, intervened. He instructed that the lump of flesh be divided into 101 pieces. These pieces were placed in the pots filled with clarified butter and carefully nurtured. And after some time, they transformed into 100 sons and 1 daughter. Among these children, the first to emerge was Duryodhana. His birth symbolized strength and leadership, but it also carried a shadow of what was to come. Now here is where things get airy. Duryodhana's birth wasn't greeted with celebration. Instead, it was accompanied by a series of ominous signs. Donkeys brayed, jackals howled, and winds roared through the kingdom. These weren't just random occurrences. They were seen as warnings. The elders in the court were concerned. Vidura, Dhritarashtra's half-brother and trusted advisor even suggested that the child be abandoned to prevent future calamities. But Dhritarashtra, blinded both literally and by his love for his son, refused. He believed Duryodhana was his hope for the future, a prince who would lead the Kuru dynasty to greatness. Despite the warnings, Duryodhana grew up in the lap of luxury. As the eldest son of Dhritarashtra, he was groomed to be the future king of Hastinapur. He was trained in the art of warfare, politics, and leadership. From a young age, Duryodhana displayed a strong will, natural charisma, and a knack for leadership. But he wasn't just a prince, he was also a brother. With 99 siblings, Duryodhana's bond with his brothers was unbreakable. He was fiercely protective of them, and they in turn followed his lead without question. But every great story needs a counterbalance, and for Duryodhana, it was Bhima. Born on the same day as Duryodhana, Bhima quickly became his rival. The two were complete opposites. Duryodhana, calculating and ambitious, Bhima, impulsive and immensely strong. Their rivalry started early. As children, they often clashed during their training sessions. Duryodhana couldn't stand Bhima's strength, while Bhima enjoyed teasing Duryodhana about his temper. This rivalry wasn't just personal, it became symbolic of the larger conflict between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Duryodhana's early life was shaped by contrast. On one hand, he was born into privilege, destined to be a leader. On the other hand, his birth was marked by ominous warnings, and his every step seemed to edge closer to conflict. His rivalry with Bhima added fuel to the fire, creating a tension that would define his life. These early experiences shaped Duryodhana's character. His ambition, his loyalty to his family, and even his envy of the Pandavas. All of it can be traced back to these formative years. But they also show us his human side. A child trying to find its place in a world that seems to be against him from the start. Duryodhana's birth and early life set the stage for everything that follows in the Mahabharata. From his strengths as a leader to his flaws as a rival, these moments define the man he becomes. In the next chapter, we will explore Duryodhana's rise to power, his bond with Karna, and the choices that sealed his fate. Stay with us as we uncover the life of this fascinating and misunderstood character. When we think of leaders in the Mahabharata, we often think of Yudhishthira's dharma, Arjuna's skill, or Krishna's wisdom. But what about Duryodhana? Despite his flaws, he was a formidable leader and warrior in his own right. Let's dive into what made Duryodhana not just a rival, but a powerful figure who commanded respect and loyalty. First, let's talk about Duryodhana's physical strength. He wasn't just strong, he was a powerhouse. Trained in mess fighting by none other than Balrama, the brother of Krishna, Duryodhana mastered the art of Gada Yuddha. His technique and sheer power made him one of the most formidable mess fighters of his time. Duryodhana's favorite sparring partner was Bhima. Their battles were legendary, even in their training days. While Bhima relied on brute force, Duryodhana's style was a mix of skill, strategy, and agility. This combination made him a worthy rival on the battlefield. But Duryodhana's strength wasn't limited to his physical abilities. His mental toughness was equally impressive. He could take defeats and setbacks and still rise stronger. This resilience made him a dangerous opponent. Now let's look at Duryodhana's leadership. Say what you will about his envy and ambition, but you can't deny that he was a born leader. As the eldest Kaurava, Duryodhana took responsibility for his 99 brothers, forming a bond that was both protective and empowering. His brothers didn't just follow him, they idolized him. In politics, Duryodhana was no less skilled. He understood the power of dynamics of Hastinapur's court and used them to his advantage. He knew how to rally allies and sway opinions. Remember his close alliance with Karna? Duryodhana saw potential in Karna when no one else did. He gave Karna the respect and status he deserved, making him a loyal friend and a key ally in the Kurukshetra war. Duryodhana's ability to form alliances extended beyond Karna. He convinced Shalya, the king of Madra, to fight for the Kauravas, even though Shalya initially intended to join the Pandavas. This wasn't just luck, it was Duryodhana's sharp understanding of people and their motivations. One of Duryodhana's most admirable qualities was his loyalty. He was fiercely protective of his family, particularly his brothers. He didn't just see them as siblings, he saw them as extensions of himself. This loyalty extended to his allies as well. His bond with Karna was a prime example of this. Duryodhana stood by Karna through thick and thin, even when others questioned Karna's low birth. Duryodhana's loyalty wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. He knew that a united Kaurava front was essential for their survival against the Pandavas. He worked tirelessly to keep his brothers united and motivated, even during the toughest times in the Kurukshetra war. But here is where things get complicated. Duryodhana's vision for Hastinapur was clear. He wanted the Kauravas to reign supreme. His ambition was driven by a belief that he was the rightful heir to the throne, and in many ways, he had the qualities of a great king: strength, strategy, and an unbreakable will. However, his leadership was flawed. His envy of the Pandavas clouded his judgment. He often made decisions that were driven by emotion rather than strategy. The game of dice, for example, was a turning point that showcased both his cunning and his inability to foresee the long term consequences of his actions. Still, it's important to remember that Duryodhana wasn't evil, he was human. His ambition and flaws make him relatable. A man trying to hold on to what he believed was rightfully his, even if it meant crossing ethical lines. So, what can we learn from Duryodhana's strengths and leadership? First, leadership isn't just about winning battles, it's about inspiring loyalty. Duryodhana did this exceptionally well, earning the unwavering support of his brothers and allies. Second, strength, both physical and mental, is a vital quality for any leader. Duryodhana's resilience in the face of adversity is a lesson in perseverance. But we also learn that leadership without balance can lead to downfall. Duryodhana's inability to manage his envy and ambition ultimately overshadowed his strength. His story is a reminder that even the greatest leaders must confront their flaws to truly succeed. Duryodhana's strengths made him a force to be reckoned with, but his flaws shaped his destiny. In the next chapter, we'll explore how these strengths and flaws played out during the game of dice, a pivotal moment that changed the course of the Mahabharata. Stay tuned as we continue unraveling the story of this complex character. Have you ever made a decision that seemed like a victory in the moment but became your biggest regret later? For Duryodhana, that moment was the game of dice, a masterstroke of strategy driven by envy, but one that changed the Mahabharata forever. Let's explore Duryodhana's role in this pivotal event. What drove him, what he hoped to achieve, and how it shaped his legacy. To understand why the game of dice happened, we need to start with Duryodhana's envy. The Pandavas had just built Indraprastha, a magnificent city that rivaled Hastinapur in grandeur. They held the Rajasuya Yajna, where Yudhishthira was crowned emperor. For Duryodhana, this was unbearable. Imagine standing in the shadow of your cousins, watching them succeed, watching them earn the respect of the world. For Duryodhana, this wasn't just jealousy, it was fear. Fear that Pandavas were taking everything he believed was his throne, his legacy, and his place in the history. This growing envy consumed Duryodhana, and it was Shakuni who gave him way to act on it. He suggested a game of dice, not just as entertainment, but as a weapon. Shakuni, Duryodhana's uncle, wasn't just a bystander in this story. He was the architect of the game. Known for his cunning and mastery of the dice, Shakuni promised Duryodhana that he could defeat the Pandavas, not on the battlefield, but on the gaming board. The plan was simple. Invite Yudhishthira to play dice, knowing full well that he couldn't refuse. Yudhishthira, bound by his principles, saw the invitation as a matter of dharma. Refusing would mean dishonor, and Shakuni knew this. It was a trap from the very beginning. Now let's talk about Duryodhana's role. He wasn't just a spectator in this scheme, he was its driving force. For Duryodhana, the game wasn't just about winning wealth or land. It was about power. It was about showing the Pandavas who the real ruler was. And more importantly, it was about breaking their spirit. Duryodhana didn't just want to win. He wanted to humiliate the Pandavas, to take away everything they held dear. Their kingdom, their pride, and their unity. And when the stake rose, he pushed for more. Wealth wasn't enough, land wasn't enough. He wanted the Pandavas themselves. This brings us to one of the darkest moments in the Mahabharata. As Yudhishthira kept losing, Duryodhana raised the stakes, urging him to wager his brothers and then Draupadi, their queen. When Yudhishthira lost her, Duryodhana didn't stop there. He demanded that Draupadi be brought to the court. Why? Because for Duryodhana, humiliating Draupadi was a statement of power. It was a way to show the Pandavas that he was in control. He ordered Draupadi to be disrobed in front of the court, a moment that shocked even the elders present. But this act of arrogance had consequences. Draupadi's humiliation wasn't just a personal attack, it was a moral failure for the entire Kuru dynasty. Her vow for justice became the seed for the Kurukshetra war. So did Duryodhana win? On the surface, yes. The Pandavas were exiled for 13 years, their kingdom lost. But in reality, the game of dice was the beginning of Duryodhana's downfall. The humiliation of Draupadi turned public opinion against him. The elders of Hastinapur, including Bhishma and Vidura, openly criticized him. Even among the Kauravas, doubts began to rise. Shakuni's plan had worked in the short term, but it sowed the seeds of a much greater conflict. one that would cost Duryodhana everything. So, what can we learn from Duryodhana's role in the game of dice? First, his actions were driven by fear and envy, emotions that clouded his judgment. Second, his focus on immediate victories made him blind to the long term consequences. And finally, his inability to see the humanity in his rivals, especially Draupadi, sealed his fate. But let's not forget, Duryodhana wasn't just a villain in this story. He was a man shaped by his circumstances, his insecurities, and his desire to protect what he believed was his. The game of dice shows us his brilliance as a strategist, but also his flaws as a leader. Duryodhana's role in the game of dice was a turning point, not just for him, but for the entire Mahabharata. In the next chapter, we will see how this rivalry played out on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where Duryodhana's leadership and resilience faced their ultimate test. Stay tuned as we continue uncovering the story of this complex and fascinating character. The battlefield of Kurukshetra wasn't just a place of war, it was the ultimate test of character. For Duryodhana, it was his chance to prove his worth, defend his family, and hold on to the legacy he believed was his. But wars aren't just won by strength, they are shaped by strategies, alliances, and emotion. Let's uncover Duryodhana's role in the Kurukshetra war, his triumphs, his struggles, and the choices that defined his destiny. Duryodhana knew that the war was inevitable. After years of rivalry, failed negotiations, and Draupadi's war for justice, the Pandavas were returning, not to talk but to fight. Duryodhana, however, wasn't afraid. He saw the war as a way to settle things once and for all. One of Duryodhana's key strengths was his ability to build alliances. He secured the support of powerful kings and warriors, including Karna, Shalya, and Jayadratha. Shalya's alliance, though controversial, was a masterstroke of political manipulation. Duryodhana convinced Shalya, who initially supported the Pandavas, to fight for the Kauravas instead. This shows Duryodhana's sharp understanding of politics and human motivation. On the battlefield, Duryodhana didn't just rely on his alliances, he also prepared himself. As one of the greatest mess fighters of his time, he knew that his strength and skill would be critical in the battles to come. Throughout the war, Duryodhana played an active role in shaping the Kaurava strategy. His plan to use Bhishma and Drona as key commanders was both logical and effective. Bhishma, with his experience and reputation, was the ideal choice to lead the army in the early days. Drona, on the other hand, was a tactical genius. Duryodhana also pushed for aggressive tactics. Remember the Chakravyuha formation? It was a complex battle strategy designed to trap and kill key Pandava warriors. Abhimanyu, the young and fearless son of Arjuna, broke into the formation but was tragically killed when the Kauravas attacked him unfairly. While this was a tactical win for Duryodhana, it was a moral loss that haunted the Kuru dynasty. Another significant moment was Jayadratha's role in holding off the Pandavas. On the 13th day, Jayadratha managed to prevent the Pandavas from reaching Abhimanyu. This act, orchestrated under Duryodhana's leadership, showed the Kauravas' ability to work as a team, even if their methods were questionable. But war isn't just about strategy, it's also about emotions. For Duryodhana, the Kurukshetra war was a roller coaster of victories and losses. The death of Bhishma, his greatest mentor and protector, was a devastating blow. Bhishma's fall not only weakened the Kaurava army but also shook Duryodhana's confidence. Drona's death was another turning point. As the war dragged on, Duryodhana found himself losing not just soldiers but also allies he deeply respected. Even Karna, his closest friend and one of the greatest warriors on the battlefield, fell to Arjuna. Each loss pushed Duryodhana further into despair, but he refused to give up. Despite these losses, Duryodhana showed remarkable resilience. He continued to lead his army even when the odds were stacked against him. His determination to fight till the end was a testament to his courage and loyalty to his cause. The final day of the war marked the ultimate showdown, Duryodhana's match duel with Bhima. This was a battle years in the making, fueled by their childhood rivalry. The duel was intense, showcasing both warriors' incredible skill and strength. But in the end, Duryodhana failed. Bhima, following his woe from Draupadi's humiliation, struck Duryodhana on the thigh, breaking the rules of match combat. This moment wasn't just the end of Duryodhana's fight, it was a symbolic end of the Kaurava dynasty's claim to the throne. His final moments were filled with defiance and pride, as he believed he had fought honorably for his family's legacy. So what does Duryodhana's role in the Kurukshetra war tell us? First, it highlights his strengths as a leader and strategist. His ability to inspire loyalty and lead his army even in the face of overwhelming odds is commendable. Second, it shows us his flaws. His over-reliance on deceitful tactics and his inability to balance ambition with empathy led to his downfall. The death of Abhimanyu and the humiliation of Draupadi were moments that defined him, not as a villain, but as a man consumed by his own insecurities. Finally, Duryodhana's role in the war reminds us of the complexity of human nature. He wasn't just a warrior or a king, he was a man fighting for his place in history. And like all of us, he was a mix of strength and weakness, courage and vulnerability. Duryodhana's journey through the Kurukshetra war is both inspiring and tragic. In the next chapter, we will explore his final moments, his legacy, and the lessons we can draw from his life. Stay tuned as we continue unraveling the story of one of the Mahabharata's most misunderstood characters. Imagine facing a moment where everything you have built, every alliance you have forged, every battle you have fought, it all comes crashing down. For Duryodhana, this wasn't just a moment, it was the culmination of a lifetime of struggle, ambition, and loyalty. Today, we will explore the end of Duryodhana's journey, his downfall, the lessons we can draw from his life, and how his story transitions into the legacy of the Pandavas. Let's start with the final days of the Kurukshetra war. By now, the Kaurav camp was in shambles. Duryodhana's strongest allies, Bhishma, the invincible, Drona, the tactical genius, and Karna, his dearest friend, had all fallen. Each loss wasn't just a blow to his army, it was a personal loss that shook him to his core. But here is what makes Duryodhana remarkable. He didn't run, he didn't surrender. Instead, he retreated to a lake, not to hide, but to buy time, to gather his thoughts, and to prepare for a final stand. This wasn't cowardice, it was strategy. Duryodhana wanted to face his enemies on his terms, as a warrior. The final battle was the mesh duel with Bhima. This was no ordinary fight. It was the culmination of years of rivalry, a clash of strength and willpower. Bhima, driven by his vow to Draupadi, was ruthless. Duryodhana matched him blow for blow, showing the skill and resilience that had made him a legendary warrior. But then, the unthinkable happened. Bhima broke the rules of mesh combat and struck Duryodhana on the thigh. It was a fatal blow, one that would end the battle and symbolically the Kaurava dynasty. Even in his final moments, Duryodhana refused to go. He believed he had fought with honor for his family, for his kingdom, and for his principles. His pride and defiance in the face of death were a testament to his unyielding spirit. Duryodhana's story isn't just a tale of war and rivalry. It's a mirror reflecting some of life's biggest lessons. First, let's talk about ambition. Duryodhana's ambition was unparalleled. He believed he was destined to rule Hastinapur, and he fought fiercely for what he believed was his. This ambition drove him to achieve great things. It made him a leader, a warrior, and a strategist. But it also blinded him to the bigger picture. His single-minded focus on defeating the Pandavas led to decisions that had catastrophic consequences. Now let's look at loyalty. Duryodhana's bond with Karna is one of the most powerful relationships in the Mahabharata. At a time when society looked down on Karna because of his supposed low birth, Duryodhana saw his potential. He gave Karna the respect and status he deserved, making him a friend for life. This loyalty extended to his brothers and allies. Despite the odds, Duryodhana never abandoned them. He fought not just for himself, but for the people he loved. But Duryodhana's greatest strength was also his greatest weakness, his inability to see beyond his own perspective. His envy of the Pandavas consumed him, clouding his judgment and driving him to the actions that were morally questionable. The humiliation of Draupadi, the unfair killing of Abhimanyu, these were moments that defined his legacy, not as a villain, but as a deeply flawed human being. What makes Duryodhana's story so powerful in its relatability? He wasn't perfect, but neither are we. His struggles with ambition, jealousy, and loyalty are things we all face in our own lives. And that's why his story continues to resonate even thousands of years later. Duryodhana's legacy is a mix of brilliance and tragedy. He was a leader who inspired loyalty and fear, a warrior who fought with unmatched skill, but also a man whose flaws overshadowed his virtues. His story is a reminder that even the greatest strength must be tempered with wisdom and empathy. And this brings us to the Pandavas. While Duryodhana's journey was driven by ambition and rivalry, the Pandava story is rooted in unity, resilience, and dharma. Where Duryodhana sought power through alliances and strength, the Pandavas found their power in their unbreakable bond with each other and their faith in Krishna. So, as we close Duryodhana's chapter, we open the door to the Pandava journey. What made them the epitome of righteousness? How did they navigate the trials of life and war? And what lessons can we draw from their extraordinary story? Stay tuned as we explore the lives of those legendary brothers and the legacy they left behind.